Okay, welcome everyone to this tutorial about creating a web testing framework from scratch using Robot Framework and the browser library. My name is René Rohner. I'm the chairman of the Robot Framework Foundation, and I'm really happy to welcome you today to this tutorial. This tutorial will be in multiple parts, so enjoy and watch it and learn stuff from Jerzy. Jerzy is a test automation specialist at NICE project in Wrocław in Poland, and he's working with Robot Framework for multiple years and is really enthusiastic about Robot Framework browser. And now give over the steering wheel to Jerzy. Thank you, Jerzy.
Yeah, thank you, René. Hello, everyone. As René mentioned, I'm Jerzy. Welcome to my tutorial. Hope you're enjoying the conference so far, and I hope we can keep that going from this tutorial. As the title suggests, we're going to be creating a web testing framework from scratch. We'll start by setting up our testing environment. Afterwards, we'll cover some basic principles that help you keep your framework easy to maintain, develop, and read for other people. Later, we'll tackle some specific problematic scenarios that you might encounter while testing. And in the end, we will cover some useful tips to help you debug and develop your tests. Okay, so you can either follow along. I'll post my repository links soon to the chat, or you can just watch whichever one is more comfortable for you. After each section, we'll have a short break for a Q&A, if there are any questions, of course. So if you have any questions during the tutorial, please note them down and ask them when the time comes. And I think that's it for the introduction. I hope everyone has a hopefully Windows PC, because I'm going to show everything on one as well, with Python installed. I also highly recommend having VS Code with the RoboCon extension. That's not necessary, but definitely helpful. Okay, so why don't we get right to it? Let's start with creating a directory for our project. Go inside. Now let me just paste my repository link to the chat. It should be there right now. Let's open git bash in the directory we just created. And clone the repository there. Okay, now let's just open the directory with our ID of choice and open up a terminal.
Jerzy, can you zoom in a little bit? So Control plus, so that the characters are maybe one more. Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. Let me just rearrange things so that there is some space for code later on. Okay, so for starters, let us make sure that we have pip and setup tools up to date. Mine are perfect. Then let's install Poetry. I know that this is a testing framework, so we're probably not going to be packaging and publishing it, though it is possible. We sometimes do package at least some parts of our robot frameworks to reuse in other projects. But Poetry sometimes helps with sidestepping some corporate policies regarding blocking access to some repositories. I had problems, especially with NPM, so yeah, helps with that, and also just streamlines the process a bit as well. So I'm going to be using Poetry as mentioned. Okay, so now let's create a virtual environment as well. And let's initialize our Poetry environment. So we can just progress through the initialization wizard. I'm not going to write too much here so that we don't lose too much time. Let's specify also some dependencies. Definitely robot framework. In the latest version, why not? Now, our browser library. Also, latest version. I'll also add PyYAML. This will make more sense later on, but that's for handling YAML files in Robot Framework. And I guess for now that would be it. So we're done. Do we want to specify development dependencies? No. And we're okay. Yes. Looks like it. All right. Now let's go to the PyProject TOML and add one more option. That's package mode. Let's set it to false. This is just to avoid Poetry pestering us later on with details regarding things that's necessary for packaging and not necessary for our testing framework. Okay, so last step would be activating our Venv environment. And initializing browser. Oh, nope, I've been too quick, sorry. First, we need to install our Poetry environment. So install all the dependencies. Sorry, I have to do a double check because there's some weird. Nope, that should be good. All right, so let's reload the terminal. Maybe I did some unnecessary steps. All right, once again. Okay, so maybe let's get rid of that for now. Yeah, so those are the warnings I wanted to avoid, but never mind. Most important part is that we have our dependencies installed, just to double check if they're actually there. Yeah, we see robot, we see browser. Okay, so now let's activate Venv. And initialize browser. So this might take a while. We have to download some browsers and initialize the whole environment. Is anyone actually following the steps live? Just a quick question, maybe raise your hand or not really. Then maybe we can skip to my other IDE where this is already finished so that we don't have to wait a couple minutes until it performs. If anyone has anything against it, then last chance to maybe write something in chat. No, not really. All right. So,
Sorry, I just joined briefly in 2 minutes. So we are setting up project.
Yeah, exactly.
This toml file, and what is else? There is a poetry. No, poetry lock is being generated as we speak, right? Okay.
So yeah, we just went
through.
That's it.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, so here is just initializing the browser environment. So I'll just skip to an IDE where this is already done, so that we don't waste time for that. Okay, so this is the installation and setup done. If anyone has any question regarding this topic, then feel free to ask them now. Okay, if not, then we can go to the next stage. So we'll create a basic web test case. So let's create a file, test robot. In this test, we have to specify some settings. All those tooltips and suggestions that you see are from robot code. That's why I highly encourage you to use it. It's really helpful, speeds up the development, makes sure there are at least less errors when you write your tests and so on. Really nice tool. So first step would be to import browser library. And for starters, that will be pretty much it as far as settings go. Now let's start specifying our test cases. So let's not be too creative, just call it test one. For our system under test, let's call it that way, I chosen the Source Lab. It was like a demo web shop or something. It's really nice because it has many interactable elements. So we'll be going to this web page. First, let's set up a new browser. We'll be using Chromium. We won't be running in headless so that we can see what's going on. And anything else that's useful right now? So yeah, the robot code also offers those tooltips for keywords as well. It just displays the whole documentation as it is available. What else? Let's add also the slow-mo argument. This is useful because it somewhat simulates how we as people progress through tests, because we don't click immediately or interact with the web page immediately. We have like some delay between particular actions. So you can specify like some milliseconds or so that it's not performed that quickly. All right, so we have a browser. Now let's open a new context. A context could be considered a new tab. For example, is there anything useful here for us? Viewport should be here. Yes, so let's set our resolution. I think I have the syntax wrong, but I'll check that.
But robot code should give you a hint. So if you remove that the string, and that control space, and then press enter, and then you see how you should have the syntax.
I'm also learning. Thanks, Renee. And now we can go to our web page. Okay, so just to see if everything works. Indeed, it opened the web page. Okay, so what can we do from now on? Usually we would have like credentials stored somewhere, but so that we can learn some interactions with the page, let's extract the credentials from the page. So I'll just open the development tools so that we can see the page structure. So the login credentials are in the div element with ID login credentials. Okay, maybe I'll open the page also in my normal browser. Very handily, almost every element on this page has IDs, so it's really easy to use, but we'll try different locator strategies along the way as well, so no worries. So if we want to get some text from the page, we can use just the keyword get text. It requires just the selector. In browser, we can, but don't have to specify the locator strategies, at least for some of the strategies. So CSS is the default locator strategy or the locator engine. So if we didn't add any prefix such as this ID equals, it would first think it's a CSS locator, unless we started the locator with either, I never remember whether it's the backslash or forward slash, but with double this type of slash, or
Forward slash.
with forward slash, or with dots, specifying that we are going to use the XPath engine. But for now, let's just use our ID as it's the quickest, and per definition, the IDs should be unique, so also it's one of the most stable, unless they are dynamically generated, but here is not the case, so let's not worry. We can also get the password from the web page. Let's double check what's the locator for the password field, but this time it's a class, not an ID, so that's even better, because we can use a CSS locator. So it was a div with the class of login password. So CSS we can specify by either providing the node name or not. That part is not necessary. Then dot means we are going to be using the class attribute. And after the dot, we can provide the class value. We can also specify other attributes. We'll probably show that later on. So for now, let's leave it at that. And so see what we get. Add maybe an argument to our robot execution command so that the results aren't generated in the root of the project, just in a results file, so that we avoid some mess in our repository. What's happening? Well, we won't see much yet. So it again opened the web page, and now it's just extracting the text from the fields we have located. Let's wait for it to finish. Okay, so let's see how our results look like. So we extracted the whole available text as was visible in the web page. Okay, so the password is almost usable as is, but we have to do some trimming to the available usernames. Some are locked or problematic, so we'll just use the standard user, but okay, so to do that, we'll need some other libraries. First, let's get the string library. And first we'll just fetch only the logins, because as we can see, first we have like just accepted usernames are, those are not the logins. So let's get rid of that. And let's get a list of logins. To do that, we will have to get the collections library also imported. That's for later. Sorry. And as we've seen, the only login that's interesting for us now, it's the first one. So in the end, the login will be the first login. Now let's do similarly for password. There we'll have much less to do, as there's just the initial part to get rid of. Just to make sure. Let's log it into the log and see how it goes. I've shortened the slow-mo parameter, so yeah, hopefully the browser closes a bit quicker this time. And we are almost there. As we can see, there is a new line in the password. So we would just add the stripping of the string, and now we can go further. So we can enter our login into the username field. Are there any interesting parameters here? Yeah, we have
Maybe we can. The data test is something that is also directly supported by Playwright as a locator, but
Okay.
without the quotes. And those are typical IDs that are actually made for testing by your developers. If you find some data test, encourage your developers to create more of them. So just remove the quotes. Yeah, that should work, and then the value.
And we can also enter the password. For that, I suggest using the field secret. Of course, in our situation where the password is very explicit and visible for everyone, it doesn't make that much of a difference, but normally you extract those from some secure credential stores, hopefully. And let's double check how our password field looks like. If there's anything else, maybe we can use some other selector engine. Well, why not maybe do an XPath this time? Just to see. So, was it an input? Yes, so it's an input. I've copied the placeholder attribute from the elements, and it locates a single element. So why not? Usually I would rather choose the ID or like the data test attribute, but just to have different selector engines, I'll input the XPath here.
At Jersey, you have to make named arguments on the second position as well if you have the named arguments. So selector equals, and this must be secret equals.
Yeah.
And same with the txt, I think it's the argument name. Yeah.
And we will have to click the login button. Also, it has an ID. No, it's not this one. This one. Button. Okay. Clicking is, well, I think the most simple action. And let's see if it's actually logging in. Ah, yes. So we have the error here, direct assignment of values as secret is not allowed. So that's because otherwise, when we use the normal notation with the curly braces, the value would be substituted and thus included in the log. And with this notation, the variable is used as is, so it wouldn't be visible there.
Yeah, maybe as one addition to that keyword. In generally, you have to be really careful with Robot Framework because Robot Framework is really logging basically everything. And that also causes to logging of variable values and if you run it on log level trace. And therefore, if you have passwords and variables, they would be logged. If you use type secret, that keyword type secret or field secret are kind of actively hiding or actively not logging whatever you give as a secret, as long as not Robot Framework has already logged it. Therefore, you can here use this dollar password notation, and then the variable will be resolved within the keyword. If you say, I don't care because I have, like Jersey here, logged it anyway multiple times before, you can just use fill text also for passwords. It's just the same, just fill secret is not logging and it's expecting this kind of notation. So that's the only difference between these two keywords.
Exactly. Thank you, Renee. So maybe let's not watch me spell out a long test case live, because that will take a bit more time. Let's maybe switch the branch to the next stage where I have the, yeah, sure, the test case finished. This test case is basically just logging into the web page, adding a couple items to the cart. So let's do going to the cart, progressing through checkout, and finalizing the order. So maybe we can watch it happen live. So as this is pretty quick. And we have a second test case. This one was just looking what is this sorting value. So first we created the browser, logged in as before, checked what's the active sorting value, then getting the element labels from all the items, creating a list of them, and then creating a copy of the list of items, sorting it and comparing them if they're actually the same. So if the sorted list and our actual list were the same, it means that the items were sorted alphabetically correctly. Notice I just added the conversion to lowercase. That's because the sorting is done, oh my God, I don't remember. The values in sorting for lower and uppercase letters are different, so you would have some discrepancies if the casing was different. Okay, so as you can see, this is not really readable. I mean, okay, I can see that there are some actions performed, but I don't really see what's happening. I see clicks, I see some locators, and so on. And also, some parts of the tests are doubled between the separate test cases. So we could extract them to separate keywords, maybe at least. But if we imagine that we, for example, have, I don't know, multiple suites of tests that would reuse the same keywords, then having keywords in the test suites also would be quite cumbersome, because if we wanted to change anything, then we would have to go through all the test suites. So the best practice, at least the one I ascribe to, is using the page object model. What the page object model means is, or describes, is just having the actions and details of each page in a separate object. And let's maybe just start on that. So we have the objects, as I said, mainly for the purpose of easier maintenance, so that everything regarding particular screens, pages, pop-ups, and so on is contained in a single file, and it can be easily reused in other places, and it can also be shared with other peoples and projects. So that's the main reason for using those. So let's create a resources directory where we will have our pages. And I'm jumping just a tad ahead, but let's also add a, no, not here. Here. Okay, so first, as for utils, let's create a general browser management keyword. Now, notice I'm using a different extension for the file. That's the practice for robot framework. So we can mark all robot files with .robot, but it's better practice to mark resource files with .resource. this way is an easy differentiation between one and another. So whenever we look at the file, we know whether it's a test case, test suite, or a resource file. Difference between those is also that resource files can't contain the test cases or tasks section. And if we accidentally put one in the resource file, then when the extension is used, we should get a notification from robot code saying that we made a mistake.
Maybe one addition here, and that is really important once you start to have a little bit bigger projects. Robot framework, when executed, is only parsing .robot files by default. You can give it also other extensions that shall be parsed, but only robot files are imported. That means resource files are not imported or not loaded by robot framework when it's going over these directories, therefore not parsed as long as they are not needed. When they are actively import, which Jersey will show soon, they are parsed. But this is a performance impact. And also for robot code, it's a performance impact because it then has to parse everything and search for tests, but not finding tests because only keywords are specified here. So really, this is highly encouraged also in old projects to just rename them all, search and replace for the name, rename the file extension to increase performance.
Okay, so we can basically just cut all the... So I started creating a setup browser keyword just for setting up the browser. We can parameterize it, and I will. Why not? This way we can change those parameters when we use the keyword if we want to, but we can also specify default values. So that we don't need to whenever we use the keyword. The prefixes everywhere. I usually like having all the necessary, not necessary, all the prefixes there, just so that I'm sure that I don't omit anything and that the whole process is explicit and easily understandable for anyone who looks at the code. And accepts it. Yes, it will. So if we want to specify multi-line pretty much anything in robot framework, we just enter a new line, add the 3 dots at the beginning of the indent, add a tab, or I don't think that's necessary. And then we can continue typing in our, well, in this case, arguments, but this can be used for providing arguments to keywords and structuring the code so that it's better legible, or for documentation, pretty much everything else. Okay, so we have our setup browser keyword ready. Now we would like to use it in our test case. Maybe I can make it a tiny bit smaller. Is it still legible?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go on. So to import our resource file, we need to, surprise, surprise, use the resource import clause, and then we have to provide a path to the resource. We could specify the path from root, or we should do that. There is one neat trick that we can use to not have to write such long paths, and that would be adding the Python path option to our arguments file. This way we can omit the resources, at least this one level from the paths we specify for our resources and later variables files and so on. I'm using this variable. This is the system agnostic path separator, so that we avoid problems when we try to run the code on Linux instead of Windows.
Actually, that is not necessarily here. So this if you really, for example, executing something in the command line or so, having a command, then you can use that. But here you can always just use / independently on which system you are, and then I think the path is more readable. I absolutely encourage what you have said about the Python path. Don't use something like a variable like resource folder or something like this everywhere where you're importing it. Don't go .. / 2 times up the tree and then in the resource folder or stuff like that. It's I cannot say that more often. Like, use the Python path, define the Python path, or add stuff to the Python path where your resources are, and then you can just use from that folder down all your resources. Really good.
Yeah. So now that we have our resource file imported, we can use all the keywords that are within. So we can just set up our browser instead of having all those explicit browser keywords. The only thing that we will change is what? We don't want it to run in headless, so let's specify headless to false. We have a bigger monitor that was by default, so let's change the viewport to this one. Let's click. Okay, let's copy those options to the other one. Of course, in this case, we could just specify in the settings section something like suite setup and just paste this keyword there. But this is more general robot framework tip, not specifically for browser testing, but why not? Let's do that. And let's run our test just to make sure that we did everything right. Oh, I see that we didn't immediately. Did we add the, yes, because we didn't tell our robots that we are using an argument file. Now I can spell as well. Sorry. And as we can see, the tests progress the same way as before. The other, yes, because I specified this as suite setup, not test setup. Okay. So I changed the suite setup to test setup so that setting up the browser is for both test cases. I'll also remove the path to our test because it's already included in the argument file. And yeah, now let's prepare at least one page resource. This one might look a bit more useful in a second. So we can definitely, well, pretty much use all those settings. First, we can get all the available logins. Let's start with available password as well. Now I'm just cutting the parts that correspond to particular actions. So as you can see, I'm just getting the available logins from the web page, removing the let's say greeting or the header of the field. So pretty much all that we used in our test case. This is correct. This is almost there. Okay. And instead of writing all that in our test case, we can just, as before, import the resource. Yes, the login page resource. Also, just to make it maybe let's move the variable specification to outside of the page object so that it's more explicit and visible inside our test case. Okay. And here. We can also set those variables as suite variables for further use. Same for password. Let's just give a quick check if it works again. It does not. Let's look at the results. What might be the case? Okay. Okay, as we can see, everything works as before. There were some minor hiccups, but pretty much no issues, right? No change in the behavior. And as you can see, it's beginning to start to look a little bit more understandable. So we have every action has a name, can be reused in multiple places. Yeah, I forgot to actually reuse it there. But we should do that for every single page that we go through. And so maybe that we don't waste time again looking at me creating resource file for everything. We can maybe just switch our branch to the next stage. Where we have everything already prepared. So I prepared the resource files for every page that we went through. So starting with the login page, we have I added the login keyword itself as well. Then on the products page, we have the adding item to cart by item name. And I also moved the test to the test folder. And if we look at the keywords or at the test cases now, they are starting to look much, much better, pretty much like a business description. So just setting up the browser, getting logins, adding particular items to cart, and so on. So that would be the end of the section regarding creating page objects for our pages. Do we have some questions? I see that there are questions in the chat.
We have one question here about the repository. Just if the stage 8 does contain every thing.
Yes, so the stage 8 is just pretty much the repository, but a little note to that there will be a second one later on, but just for one of the stages. Probably you noticed that the branches are missing stage 7, but pretty much yes. There might be some minor differences because I did go back to some of the stages and like change the argument file a little bit or something like that. But each stage corresponds to a section in the talk description. I saw that the 8th section didn't update. So either I did something wrong in the talk description, or it's just takes some time to update from the pre-talks system to RoboCon IO. So if you just want to look at the code, feel free. There is some explaining I'm going to be doing during the tutorial, so you might miss a little bit, but if you want to use it as, you know, a template or just something to base your testing on, then yeah, feel free.
Sorry, do you mind posting the repository maybe in chat here, because I didn't catch up from the beginning?
It is in the very beginning, but I can post it there, Jersey. You don't have to. I can do it.
All right.
Okay.
I posted it.
And as for Simon's question regarding the slow-mo, then not sure if it's 50 seconds because that would be
0:0 something is then the seconds. Yeah, it's hours, minutes, seconds, and then dot something is then milliseconds. But you changed it in the end to 00.5, which would be 500 milliseconds.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be it for this stage. And now we can move to the third part. So moving locators to variable files. So our tests and page objects start to look much better than before. In this particular case, the locators aren't especially complicated, but still it's not completely apparent what they might be. We, of course, can move the locators just from the keywords to the variables sections, but I advise using variable files for at least for the purpose that one, you have them, again, as with page objects, centralized in single files, and they can be imported between particular resources. So an example advantage of that would be if you have a keyword in one of the page objects that opens the second page, you can validate that the page was opened by, for example, waiting for an element to appear and so on. And this way we can just import the locators from the second resource file, not resource file, but the page object, and then have them available without having to import the whole resource file. Another advantage of using variable files for locators is they can be specified by your developers if need be. So when they are creating the web page and creating the IDs for particular elements, they can just send you, in my example, a YAML file, but Robot handles plenty other formats like Python or I think JSON and just plain text files as well. So any of those would be fine. The strategy would be pretty much the same as with the page objects. So I just create a variable file for each of the pages as well. So and we can just move the locators from the resource files to the variable file. So first we have I chose YAML and I use it daily, mostly because it has almost the simplest syntax and a couple tricks, such as you can specify sub-elements and then use those in your tests. There's not much extra like braces or any special symbols. It's just you have to keep in mind to have correct indents and just the basic structure, as in the element name. I don't remember the name, but this symbol, space, and then the value. Yet. So let's do that quickly. Oh, yeah, I forgot the spaces. Here they are. Oh, and here also we have an example of a CSS locator that's using the ID. So if we add the hash symbol, then everything after the hash. So here we have the node name, hash, and then the ID of the element. And using variable files is pretty similar to using resource files. The import clause changes from resource to variables, but that's pretty much the only difference. And using the values, the variables themselves, is by importing the YAML file, we just get variables with the names of the objects in the YAML file. Or if we created a Python file, then the name of the variables in the Python file. So I'll just substitute those. All right. So this should still work. Let's double check we didn't introduce any errors. I probably have to specify the path to the tests. No, it works. Okay. I see that there were some issues. Let us double check what's the problem.
That's not a valid XPath.
Okay, so let me double check what could be the problem here.
Can you go to the variable?
Yeah. Ah, okay. So sure, I copied it alongside this one. Okay, so. Quick check, if it logs in, then I'll just stop the execution so that we don't have to wait through the whole thing. Yeah, it logged in, so we can stop it. All right. So this is pretty basic, of course, but using YAMLs, as I said, you have the YAML structure. That's helpful. And helpful in what way? For example, we can have, let me just create the, what was the name? Products page one. So for example, we don't want to specify like complete variables. For example, this would be sorting order option name A to Z, or alphabetical ascending or descending, something like that. We could have such long variables. It's not a problem, but it's a bit cumbersome to use and create all the time. So we can instead do something like let's just look at the locators. Maybe this can give us some pointers as to okay, so we have some abbreviations for the values, but we can of course use the whole text, why not? But let's go with the short abbreviations. So sorting option, it was AZ for alphabetical ascending, and this would be um, for example, like that. So instead of having to write like sorting option AZ, sorting option ZA, and so on, we can just specify it like this. This way, under one variable, we have multiple options to choose from. Where are the products page? And we could, no, not here. Create a keyword like select sorting arguments. Yes, do something like sorting order. And we don't have the for now. Let's leave it empty just so that it and of course, 1 second, we have to, of course, import the variables files. So maybe. So that we keep the same convention for everything. And we can use it like that, just specifying which of the sub-elements we want to use. This won't work on this particular web page because their sorting dropdown doesn't actually work. I know I can click it here and it changes, but at least from browser's perspective, it's not, this dropdown isn't visible, and this is pretty much apparent when we just try to alt tab from it. Not sure how to handle that, but unfortunately it is as it is. But apart from that, this is the way we could use it. We can also, for example, create locators with options, not options, with variables within them. So maybe let's not look at me trying to write that right now so that we don't waste that much time. Let me just look for the example. Yeah, so for example, we can just have variable names in the locators, and later on, when we use those locators within our tests, we can just, well, if the variable is available, then we can just use them, and it should be replaced automatically. I like to add the step with replacing variables just to make it explicit that a variable was included in the locator, and that I am replacing it with the value that's available in my test. And it's also useful to add a short comment before the locator, like that the variable needs to be specified in the test beforehand or something like that. Yes, and that's pretty much it for moving locators to variable files. Maybe just one tiny thing, because I didn't show one of the uses that I mentioned. So in our login resource, after logging in, we just check if the menu button and the shopping cart button are available. We get those variables, those locators, just by importing the variable file. And that's this time. That's it for moving locators to variable files. I see that we have at least one question. But do we have anyone wanting to ask anything on camera? I see not. Then regarding variable files, which one would be best to use between YAML file and Python file? That pretty much depends on your situation. I like using YAML files because I don't work with, like, I don't know, environments that have some environment specific prefixes to arguments and so on, because Python files let you parameterize all the variables upon import, so you can for example, just provide some values to the variable on import and like generate some variables this way. In case of locators, and as I said, in my particular projects, I never needed that, so I'm usually using YAMLs because they are quick and easy, and they have a couple functionalities that are pretty useful, as for example the sub elements and so on. I'm not sure if it can be said if any one of those is better or worse, depending on the solution. Yes, Francis?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add on this topic. I've used variables files as a Python file because you can have more dynamic code. Like for instance, my other question was about like for our project, it's quite at the beginning, so it's still time to change. We decided to have one user keyword per element rather than use locator variable files. Because it feels like our web pages, they are changing a lot, and depending on the release we are testing, the locator is going to be totally different. And I feel it's a bit difficult to do in variable files for locators. So yeah, what's your take on this? So maybe it's possible for us to have the same test support several releases, because they are kind of simple web pages. Okay, so do you have anything on this topic?
So if I understand the question correctly, I think that variable files still can work here and are especially useful if you have different interactions with the elements. So for example, if you have a text field, you can fill data into that field, you can clear it, you can get the value from it. So here we have already like three instances where the locator would be used. Also, if you have variable files with your locators, you can just substitute the whole variable file, and that variable file could be prepared for you by the developers. If they know that some locators are going to change, that they can just change the values in the variable file, send it along with the release, and you can just substitute it in your framework or load it dynamically in the pipeline and so on. So I would still think,
maybe I've more about this question is like we have to test table, and sometimes they are implemented as table, sometimes as div, depending on the release. And it looks like a locator file might be a bit restrictive about how to get the various elements. I'm not sure if this is the case or not.
Okay, so if we were switching from completely different page structures, so from a table to divs, then it wouldn't necessarily invalidate the variable file itself, but you would definitely have to change the whole approach from like navigating by locating particular divs to moving around in a table. So yeah, but I didn't have such a situation, so I can't say from experience, but I feel that this could still be handled by like substituting the locators, like the variable files with locators, especially if you're using Python, and this can do more dynamic stuff. So,
right, thank you.
So maybe I also want to share my opinion on the situation with locators and variables. I think in general, I wouldn't generally recommend to use locators and variable files. The problem is if you have good locators and if you're working properly with a developers together, and they are, for example, using data test IDs or data test equals something or data test ID, which is nowadays a little bit more common, I would say. And the idea of the element is naming and is speaking, and it would be the same as you would like to name your variable, for example. I wouldn't choose a variable for that locator, because the variable is then bleeding into all the other robot files. So you have a huge amount of variables, and it will be, you have to prefix your variable like everything with loc underscore something to understand that's a locator, for example, just to see the difference between, okay, that's the lock-in value and this is a lock-in locator and stuff like that. So you get a bunch of variables, and then you start structuring naming conventions and so on. For stuff like we have here with this XPath or so, or if you have some more complex locator, I'm definitely there to recommend a naming value for that. So a naming variable, and then have a complex locator that's not telling at all what it's locating, because it's such a complex thing. But if you have a good proper locator strategy, I would more recommend to use the locators directly on the fill text and click text, because you're not polluting your environment with unnecessary overhead, because they are already explanatory.
So you must have better experiences with at least the systems you're testing. I'm usually working with more legacy stuff.
Yeah. That totally agree. So if you have these systems where the developers do not talk at all with you, or just don't care the testability of the design, I totally agree. That's just necessary, because otherwise you're in a maintenance hell as well. Yeah.
That's true. Okay. Thank you. Any more questions?
To add a bit more to the discussion about yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe some latency there. There was a video, like, I don't think it was from last year RoboCon, but maybe the year before, a video about the speaker was saying that we tend to use two static selectors relying on the ID of the fields. Or I guess the issue is the same with test IDs. And he would advise to find the element with a closer approach that what a user would do when navigating the page. So eventually the speech boiled down to that we should rather like look for the title of a table and then go for find a column in this table, etc., rather than rely on the ID in the web page. I couldn't find the reference right now,
it's Václav Fuchsa who did this talks. Are your locators too stable? I think was the title. Yeah, I think that's an approach. It's an approach, for example, like the title and using the text is something that you can use with browser library. The text selector is something super helpful for that approach. The problem also here is if you have, for example, a translated UI and you want to test it in multiple languages, you then again are in a maintenance hell, because then you have to make locators for English and locators for German and locators for French and for Spanish and for Polish, and so the like the label of elements is even something that changes quicker, because some developer think, oh, that's a better naming, or some product owner said, can we rename that, and it's not even noting that down in the user story. So yeah, it highly depends on stability and so on. So I think the general recommendation is you have to check what's best for your project. There are multiple approaches here.
I think it's also important for this topic what you want to test. If you want to test the language, okay. If you want to test the function, okay. I have maybe additional question to this topic. Many of you probably test websites, but we test desktop applications, and we have few tools to address the address of the locators in these applications. But I'm still looking for a good solution to solve the path resolution. When you have application and there is some tree through the applications. For example, for web applications, there's XPath. I would like to have in my editor, in my IDE, dot convention. Like I make dot, and I want to select what's under the dot. Yeah. For this approach, I can use objects in the Python, but it's not much handy. Is there any other options to use this convention without I have to create the objects tree?
Jersey, do you have an answer on that, or?
No, not really. So if you have one, then feel free.
So there is a difference between robot dictionaries and Python dictionaries. And robot dictionaries are the so-called .dict Python class, basically. So you can also use the dot notation there. I'm actually not sure if Daniel is supporting code completions on dictionary structures. I don't think so, actually. But this could be a cool extension for robot code, so that you just say, okay, because Daniel, when you type it and it's a static variable, he knows the structure of the variable. So you start kind of typing the name of the dictionary and then hit the dot, then he can offer you the keys of that dictionary. And you hit the dot and you can offer you the other keys. And I think Jersey, this sorting options, for example, is also it's a dictionary, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you can access that with a dot notation as well, can't you?
Yeah, I showed that a second ago. So where was it? Yeah, so it was in the
Yeah, so you can do that, but you don't get any code completion. Yeah, okay. That's what I wanted to double check. So, but that could be a cool situation, because if you just can you remove the dot lohi quickly and then just hover this sorting option with the mouse? Yeah, close a bracket.
Okay.
Braces and okay, I thought he does show the value as well. Okay, he's not, but I think he knows the value at that point. So that could be a cool feature.
Yeah.
Okay,
but probably if we had it here in the variables section, then maybe it would. Let's do a quick check.
So raise an issue on GitHub on robot code. And so go to robotcode.io and then raise an issue. And if you want to have that issue also solved, throw something like €20 to Daniel as a supporter on GitHub, and then we will be happy to implement stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. Do you think €20 will be enough? Yeah.
I don't know. Let's find out. We can start low, and if every one of you sends €20, I think then it's enough.
Yeah, it will be a really cool feature. Yeah, definitely.
Hello.
Yeah, so
okay, here you see the values actually. So from this one, he knows the value. What about the if you use square brackets? No, I mean
I specified it here.
I know. Just at there, use a square bracket. Yep. Does he offer some completion? No. Okay. Yeah.
No.
Maybe
oh, there's Daniel.
I heard my name.
Hello.
So what is the feature?
Code completion for dictionary keys and dictionary structure.
There's already an issue open for this.
Okay, then just make thumbs up on the issue and throw some money on Daniel, then it works.
But that's maybe also a solution. Just create one bigger dictionary to build up the whole structure of a application. Maybe start with an app, and then you have all the entries in the YAML file or something like this.
Yeah, and I mean he has a YAML file on the left side, so you could make a dictionary like lock or locator dot something. But if you don't get code completion for the dot something, so the structure of the YAML file, people really have to know all the time what to type. So
yeah, The main problem for the YAML file, I disabled this at the moment to bring up complex Python objects, to save this complex Python objects for the language server. This is one bigger problem here because I didn't know how big they are. So if you have maybe 10,000 entries in there, then this is a real big performance problem for this, or maybe you use a variable file from a Python file and then get a new a whole object instance from whatever type. It's not really possible. So I didn't find a solution for this, a good solution for this. So I don't know.
Yeah,
The other idea I had is to make something like a map object or something like this, and then maybe you have a new view on the side, on the left side, where you can see this entries from an object, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's cool too.
Yeah, something like this. So show some structures in the IDE how it looks like the YAML file or whatever, and then just drag and drop your.
The best that will be do both, yeah.
Okay, continue.
I will send it.
Thank you very much.
It help.
Yeah, but it's also ideas for further development of my own framework. So nice discussion. Thank you.
Okay, just a short thing. I proposed for the community day later a blog for talking about robot code, maybe something like a bug hunting, and talk about new ideas, enhancements, whatever. Maybe you will join for this.
Hopefully, yes.
Okay, good. Now continue.
Thank you.
So.
Okay, I see that we are slightly short on time, so we'll speed up the further parts, but there's one last question to you, René, actually. But
I would just say if the locators are shitty, then write a variable file. So I mean, if for example like this CSS with the inventory item name, I think that's pretty clear. Yeah, div inventory item name, you understand basically what it's doing. The option value AZI or the I don't know, maybe for example the select container. Drop down the select container. You don't understand that span select container, even though if it's the only one, is a sorting drop down. So then I would tend to make variables. And for example, the lowest two ones, I maybe wouldn't do a variable. So that's the basic rule of thumb. If you can tell what the locator means, maybe you can save a variable for that.
Okay, thanks a lot for the clarification.
all right, so as I said, we are slightly short on time, so maybe I'll skip to just going to the next stage and explaining it and running the code instead of writing it live, so that we save a couple minutes. So next part will be some problematic scenarios that we might encounter. So basically, first one is file handling, so either up or download. There are a couple possibilities for both. Maybe let's sync the changes just in case. I've created a separate testing suite for that. Let me double check the arguments. Okay. Okay, so when it comes to downloads, we have two main methods, and both of those can be separated into another two modes, so to speak. So we can download directly by providing a link to the download from the web page. So maybe let's run this test quickly. Run this test quickly to see what we're doing. This will take a couple seconds. It's just a flash through the. Okay, so maybe it's not that much to see, but there are those two methodologies. Those. So we have a download link. The element on the page is, I think, almost always A, but not always. It contains a link to the resource we want to download. And we can download this file just by using the browser download keyword, providing the href. So the link to the file on the web page. And there we have two further possibilities. We can either use the save as argument, which will specify where and under what name the file will be saved, or we can omit this argument, and then the file is just saved to a temporary cache for browser and playwright, and it's deleted after the context is closed or the test ends. So if we need to handle the files later on or use them further in our tests, then it's better to use the save as argument so that we don't have to extract the file content from the file object that's downloaded and cached in the browser cache. We can, if we provide the save as path, then we just have the file. So as we see, both of those tests passed. So first one was just download by the link, download by link with save as argument. And both of those passed. And in the second keyword, we see that the file exists under the path that we provided, and it's not an empty file. And we set the test file for further uploading. The second download method is when you have those links that after you click download, the Windows pop-up appears, of course. Yeah, this one. So this is one example where the second method is useful. It is the promise to wait for download. So in this method, we first create a promise, a promise to wait for download, where we, as before, we can specify the path where the file is saved, and under what name, but it's not necessary unless we want to use the file later on, of course. So And this lets us save all those files that require some interaction from our side. But this just provides the path that we have given to this window. Let's say that the window doesn't pop up, of course, it happens in the background. The other situation where this is helpful is when we have some buttons that perform some JavaScript underneath, and then they create the download event in the background. So we don't even have a link to the resource as we had as we have here with those hrefs, hrefs. We just have a button that we press to download things. Something happens in the background, and then the download event starts in the browser. So in those situations, we also need to first create the download and then do our interactions with the page. So, for example, clicking the button or the link that starts the whole download event. Apart from that, the file object created is the same as with the plain download keyword. We can also use the save as option if we want to handle the file later on. And that would be it for downloads. Yeah.
May I add two things about the downloads? One thing, if you use stuff like connect to another browser server, you must use the save as option. And only if you use this save as option, the downloads are kept over the time of the test. So by default, all downloads are deleted when the test is over. So if you use this save as option, it's saved there persistently, and you can access it after the test is done. And the other thing is the promise to wait for download has another argument. I think it's wait for finished or so. Can you hover maybe the wait for finished? If you set that to false, it is actually not returning a promise but a download object, and then you can use I think get download state or something like this, and you can also cancel download. So some pages sometimes you do not really require to download an element and work with that element. Some pages or forms just require you to click on a download. So for example, I have downloaded the I don't know, the business agreements, or I have downloaded my contract papers. So you can just say, okay, wait for finished false, and then just cancel the download after you clicked, because the page cannot verify that you have finished it. So you don't really have to wait for all the stuff to being downloaded. So that's a new feature of the 18 something. Yeah.
And also, if you just don't care about the file, just want to check if the element starts the download event, then of course this is also useful, especially for larger files, but whenever. The part about remote browsers will be touched upon a bit later on, so you did some foreseeing or future telling. Okay, so as for downloads, that would be it. As for uploads, it's a similar situation. So we have like a direct upload to the element. So if we have a file input element on the web page, we can directly upload a file to it. But if we have the need to do the interaction, so similarly as with downloads, where we have to click a button, the Windows Explorer opens, and we have to select the file and so on, we can use the promise to upload file keyword instead, provide it with a path to our file, and just proceed with the interactions that need to be happened, but need to happen. But we need to remember that the promise needs to be created before we do the interactions with the browser. That would be it for file handling. Any questions to that? Okay, then I think we can go on to the second problematic scenario I thought of, then handling iframes and shadow DOM. So iframes are getting less and less popular, but they still happen here and there. And what they are is they are like a separate frame on the web page where like a sub DOM, so the sub document is available, even though when you look at the page itself, let me quickly go to it. Larger, can I make this bigger? Yes, I can. It's not really obvious that there is anything different here. We just go through the document, everything seems normal. It's inside the document tree. Oh my God, it's really deep. And here we have this iframe node, and it doesn't really look any different than anything we usually see in our test. It doesn't even have to have this hash document and a separate HTML inside. It sometimes contains just normal elements, but normally we can't access it just by writing. So if I use just a let's do it so it's body, even though we find it with an XPath here in the DevTools, if we use this XPath in our framework, let me see, yeah, here, maybe I can run this test, why not? So, I'm adding the argument to include just those tests so that we don't have to wait for the rest.
So one question, sorry, does record selector helps with iframes and shadow DOMs?
Yeah, what?
The record selector from the debug library, does it help with iframes and shadow DOMs now?
No.
I will show the debugger library later on, but I didn't use it for this purpose, so I'm not sure. Maybe we can look at it if we have time.
But the keyword record selector is a browser keyword. It's you can use it from the debug console or where also in your test. But it uses some JavaScript, so it goes to a specific element and then search from that element to the root element. Where it's kind of unique, and find a unique selector. The problem is the element that is inside an XPath has no clue that it is inside an XPath, inside an iframe. So an element in an iframe thinks that the root element is that document node of that iframe. It's not aware of something out there. So if you're executing a JavaScript within an iframe, you cannot exit this iframe outside. So the record selector can only give you the information inside that iframe. And same with Shadow DOM, it does also only give you this Shadow DOM thing, which doesn't matter because Shadow DOM is anyway transparent for Playwright by default. But iframe, you have to know that's an iframe, then you have to select the iframe, and then you have to make the record selector of the sub-elements. Until now, actually.
So exactly as Rene said, as far as iframes go, here I just provided the XPath to the getElement keyword. And I'm expecting I enclose it in the run keyword and return status. I expect it to fail. And as you can see, the test passed. So indeed, the XPath wasn't found, even though we saw in the developer tools that it located it without issue. So to manage such situations with iframes, we have to use the setSelector prefix keyword. And it has to contain the locator of the iframe itself, and then space and those triple arrows. So if we look at the iframe, I just located it with the ID. So it's iframe hash, so ID and ID itself, set the prefix, and afterwards, when we try to get the element by the same XPath as before, we see that it should be true, so it should have passed, and indeed it has passed. It's useful to save the old prefix, so the setSelector prefix returns the value of the previous prefix, and it's useful to save it for later so that when you exit the iframe, meaning you stop interacting with stuff within the iframe, you just set the prefix to whatever it was before. That's useful, especially if you like have nested iframes and so on, and you need to return to particular levels, or however you could describe it. The second thing with Shadow DOM, that's really a problem mostly if you like using XPath, because as Rene mentioned, Playwright can pierce into the Shadow DOM with most other locator strategies. So with CSS text, well, text is pretty much CSS with the using the attribute text, and so when not using XPath with browser library, Shadow DOM is no problem. The maybe interesting part is if you want to avoid getting into the Shadow DOM. So, for example, you expect that there could be a similar element in the Shadow DOM, and you don't want to find it by any means. You can use the light notation next to the selector strategy. So like here, we just have the CSS, again, forgot the name of the, whatever, the two dots and light, and then normal equal signs, and provide our selector. Then we make sure that even if there is an element in the Shadow DOM, it won't be located. And that would be it for the special cases of iframes and Shadow DOMs. Any questions regarding to this? Okay, I see that not. Then if anyone still wants to stay a bit longer, and if it's not a problem, then we can go to the next section, meaning...
Yeah, maybe just one thing. So we have now 11 o'clock UTC, which means the open space is starting in GetterTown right now. So if you go on RoboCon.io, there is a button at the top, like join open space. However, the first half hour will anyway be just like coffee opening talking thing. And then at 11:30, so in half an hour, there will be starting with the agenda setting and the more official part. So if you like, you can go casually there to GetterTown. Otherwise, you can also stick here for some minutes.
Okay, Thank you. So I don't see any questions, so let's progress. So the next one part is using remote browsers. Playwright does work with Selenium Grid, at least as long as you're using version 4 and above. This makes it possible to use browser with systems such as Lambda test, browser stack, and so on, or of course, just normal Selenium grids. The only difference to using normal browsers is first, you don't create a browser, you connect to it, and the difference is that you have to specify the connection parameters in a specific way. Let me first copy the repository address so that you can also check it out later on, or now, of course. And so the difference is, instead of creating a new browser, we connect to the browser and we provide the WSS endpoint address. So maybe make it bigger. Yeah, this whole address is just available or set in your own grid. This one in particular is just the Lambda test endpoint. But of course, if you're using any other of the providers or have your own grid, then of course this part will change. As far as the remote capabilities, or at least that's what I have named it, you just have to create a dictionary with required fields specified. I know that this works on just a basic Selenium Grid version 4 and up. Of course, this object, this element, is Lambda test specific. So you provide some authentication and selected systems. For normal Selenium Grid, I think the platform and so on is just specified inside this well, it's a JSON. You just parse it then to a string, and you use those capabilities just by adding them to the end of the link to your endpoint. Afterwards, it's business as usual. You have almost every functionality just as on your local browsers. The big difference, or one of the only ones I've noticed so far, is when it comes to downloading file. As Rene mentioned before, you must use the save as function because the cached version is not available for you. So you have to download the file directly to wherever the test is run, not where the browser instance is initiated.
And I think it's stored there on this machine, right? I've never really tried it there remotely, but I think it's not on your machine then, on a parser, and it must be a path there.
Playwright doesn't even allow you to do it. It just throws an error that when using the remote connection, you just can't use any of the download keywords without providing the save as path. So
yeah, I just mean that the path that you're providing there is on the remote machine. It's not going back to the Playwright and save it there, right?
No. It saves to wherever the test is executed. At least it happens.
So remotely. Yeah. Okay. So if you're no, you say where the test is executed. So let's say I'm here, and the browser is here in the cloud, and then I use save as. Is it downloaded there or where the browser is?
We can even, hopefully we can see it. Let's remove the
again what learned.
Yeah, just to make sure, I'll clean the node so that we make sure we don't have any browsers. hopefully it takes a bit less than initializing.
Oh, but clean node means like you're deleting every node stuff. You have to do
Yeah.
rf browser init.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when we do it with skip browsers, it doesn't
Got it.
down. I wanted to do the clean node and init without browsers just to make sure that I don't
There's
have any
nothing
browsers
locally happening.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was surprised a couple of times where, oh, everything works without issues. Oh, it was just using
I have
local browser.
somewhere new browsers or so called.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and now we can just headless. Yeah, should be fine, should be fine. Yeah. Yes, it used the command from the other terminal, this one. So this will just run pretty much the same tests as before. When it comes to uploading and downloading, I just switched the browser generation to connect to the browser in Lambda test, and I think I changed the expected results. So some of the keywords were expected to fail, but apart from that, everything should be the same. And as we can see here, we have some MP3 downloaded from, let's check the page. I'm not even sure. No, not this one. Oh yeah, so it's the testing MP3 and an empty TXT. So it downloaded the file locally to the machine that's executing the tests. But
Nice.
I provided it with the path on my system. So yeah. And yeah, and any questions to this part? I see as part of mobile browser testing, this browser provided. Not sure. I think it more depends on the remote system you are using, but I have no experience so far with browser with mobile devices, so I can't say anything to that. I know that documentation specifies there is some basic support, but unfortunately I can help you with that, but maybe Renee? Not as well. All right, so
I mean, what you can do in the new context keyword there. No, let's start all over. There is a keyword that is called get device. So get device gives you a specific device configuration. So you need a device name. If you scroll down, maybe you see there's device descriptor source JSON. If you can click on that one, the blue one there, yeah. There you see all the devices that are configured in Playwright, like an iPhone X, like a Samsung something, and so on. And as you see there, they are defining, if you stop for a second, you see the user agent that device will send. You see the screen size of the device, you see the viewport of the device, and you also see something like the scaling factor, the rotation, and so on, if it has touch or not, if it's mobile or not. So this dictionary, or a value of that dictionary, with get device, you can get a value of that dictionary. With get devices, you get the full one. And you can hand over this one to new context. And if you type in new context, you also see, I think there is a new context. There is a default browser, I think. Can you scroll in the arguments? No, up in the arguments up. No. In new context, yeah, just scroll up. Yeah, there's default browser type, and this default browser type is also written in this device dictionary. So if you have no browser open, you can just hand over to new context the dictionary, and then it will open, for example, like a WebKit for iPhones with the correct configurations. So just make new context and then add whatever device you have, so an unpacked dictionary. And then you will have like a landscape or horizontal mobile browser. And then the website also behaves like it's coming from an iPhone. That's not literal mobile testing because it's not testing on an actual device. But it's close to, because you can still test the orientation, you can still test the website's behavior. You can also anyway still simulate sensors like geolocation or stuff like that with Playwright. So on that part, we are way closer to mobile testing as we can do with Selenium library at the moment. But of course, this is not Appium library. So because Selenium library and Appium library are a little bit compatible to each other regarding the keyword design, you can make testing systems that use both. So you can exchange the library under the hood. It's a bit tricky to really manage it like that. But here with Playwright, you can cover, let's say, a pretty big amount of first level testing where you find a lot of bugs already in your mobile view or stuff that's not working on mobile orientations or mobile small windows and so on. And then the last mile you can do then on a physical device, maybe even manually, because then you will find the rendering problems and so on.
Yeah. And I recall some of the systems, the remote systems provide devices as well for testing, but probably it would still need to use Appium there for I think full support.
I'm not aware of anyone that are compatible to Playwright, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, remove the new context before. Okay.
Okay, so last little bit. The one things left is some helpful tips for debugging and developing your tests. Let's just discard the changes. Move to stage 8. So first thing first, and it was mentioned once or twice before, when debugging, your biggest friend is setting the log level to trace. This way you have all the available information, at least on the higher level, that robot can provide. This way you see all the calls that are made within keywords, all the variables, how they are resolved, and so on. In daily, just test that run every day, maybe not necessary, as it makes the logs a bit bigger and harder to read. But apart from that, when you're trying to find issues, that's your first step. Second thing, more browser related, is the record har. Let's check. And record video. So browser allows us to, when we create a new context, we have the argument record har or record video. Maybe I even have the Playwright definitions for those open somewhere. Yes. This just follows Playwright's requirements as far as recording the har file and video go. The har file contains pretty much everything that happens inside the browser. So like calls between elements, network traffic, and so on. So if you still have problems even with the log level trace, then this is the next step. Also, video allows you to see what happens or doesn't happen when the test is executed, and you don't have to use headphones and watch the execution. You can stop the video in any moment. You know the drill. It's easier to look at a saved video instead of like looking at live execution. And the last part is using the robot framework debugger library. So it needs to be installed. Where is my project Tom? It's just a library. To use it, you need to specify the listener for your execution. So it's just listener debugger. It offers some keywords like just debug. You can put it anywhere in the test. So for example, when you're just in the process of developing a test, you just add it at the end of the test case. And whenever all your finished steps are done, then the debugger window opens and you can progress from there. Also, it automatically opens on test failure. And I think even when the tests end, but I'm not sure about this.
No, on basically on any failure. But if you write debug as an unknown keyword, which is also a failure, it will then not print you the error message. It will just open. I think that's the only thing. So it's not really a library or has really like this keyword. You can just write it whatever. I mean you can use the library, but you don't have to. You can use the -- listener or basically the library import. One of those. Both you don't need. So it's yeah.
Okay.
So you can just use the listener, and then on any failure when a keyword not works, it will open. But honestly, I have not maintained it for some time. So and I think technology is a bit outdated actually. I have to look into it. An alternative for the command line would be the robot framework -debug, which is a very great fork of the debug library. So you then have a small command prompt, and you can do that stuff in your command prompt. There's, for example, I think debugger with a capital D in the listener.
I might have not installed it as well. Let me double check.
Oh, okay.
Framework.
No, it is there,
yeah.
but it's a capital
Okay.
D in the yeah.
So I just put in like a non-existent keyword in the middle, so hopefully it fails. Yes, it does. Where did the and a window opens where you can try out any keyword. Click. And you have to provide the argument, so you have to get a locator, but you can execute the keyword, check the results. When the keyword is successful, then it's added to the history. You can just then copy it and paste it into your tests. And yeah, that would be it. Any further questions?
Thank you very, very much, Jesse, for this tutorial first. And very great. Thank you. I would propose I will just end the stream, and then we can discuss the question off topic or without the YouTube stream. So thank you for watching. Thank you, YouTube. Bye bye.
Thanks.